Ladies and gentlemen, you've been counted out, you've been overlooked, you've been underestimated, and the world, it didn't just doubt, it laughed. But this moment, right now, this is not about proving anyone wrong. This is about proving something deeper. This is not just any comeback. This comeback is personal. This is about stepping back into the arena, scarred but not broken, tired but not done, and walking with the fire of someone who knows exactly what was taken and exactly what's being reclaimed. There comes a time when silence can't hold back the storm that's been building, a time when playing small is no longer an option, a time when every tear, every setback, every failure turns into fuel. And that time is now, because this is not a story of being saved. This is a story of rising. This is not about starting over. This is about taking back what was always meant to be, because the comeback is not for applause. The comeback is not for show. The comeback is personal. Pain has a way of teaching what ease never could. It pulls out the grit. It exposes the weakness and then builds strength right on top of it. When doors close and voices go silent, the only sound left is the whisper inside that refuses to give up. That whisper becomes a roar when the soul has had enough. Enough of waiting, enough of doubting. Enough of shrinking to fit where greatness can't breathe. They can call it failure, they can call it loss, but inside there's a spark that refuses to die. That spark knows what it's been through. That spark knows the battles that no one clapped for. It remembers the nights where giving up was the easier option, but never the choice taken. And because of that, the comeback is already in motion. This is about facing the mirror and saying, I'm not done. Not because of ego, not because of revenge, but because there is unfinished work. There is a dream that refuses to let go. There is a calling too loud to ignore. And even if the mountain is taller this time, even if the path is darker, the steps will still be taken. The climb will still happen. Because this time there is no looking around for support. The only support needed is already within. When people walk away, when opportunity's close, when it feels like every light has gone out, there's still one switch left. The one no one else can reach, the one only the fighter within can flip. And once that switch flips, everything changes. The world may stay the same, but the vision doesn't, the fire doesn't, the hunger doesn't. They don't teach this in schools. They don't write this in textbooks. This kind of comeback is learned in the darkness. It's learned in rejection. It's learned in pain. But once it's learned, it can never be unlearned. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it real. This isn't a motivational quote to be saved on a phone. This is the kind of transformation that lives in the bones, in the breath, in every step forward. Every scar tells a story, not of weakness but of survival, of fighting through what was meant to destroy, and those stories become armor, not to hide behind but to charge forward with, because nothing can hit harder than life itself. But nothing can stand longer than a soul that refuses to fold. Let them talk, let them doubt, let them walk away. They don't know what's burning inside. They don't know what has already been decided. That this isn't over, that this isn't the end. This is just the part where everything starts to shift. The part where the struggle turns into strength. The part where resilience becomes visible. The part where silence becomes a war cry. Some people wait for motivation, others become it. Some look for a sign, others decide they are the sign. When everything feels like it's falling apart, that's when something new begins to build, not outside. Inside, deep down, in the places no one sees, that's where the roots of a true comeback grow. And once they take hold, they break through the surface in ways no one expects. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. You don't need to convince. You just need to move. You just need to rise. You just need to keep walking even when your legs shake. Keep speaking even when your voice cracks. Keep fighting even when the odds say stop, because the comeback isn't built in comfort. It's built in fire, in pressure, in persistence. This isn't about yesterday. This isn't about who gave up or who stayed. This is about right now. This is about the next step, the next breath, the next choice, and choosing to keep going again and again until the storm is behind and the sun is breaking through. The comeback is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It's quiet, it's steady, it's relentless. And when it arrives, it doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. Because everyone sees the result, but few understand the cost. The cost of getting back up when it would have been easier to stay down. The cost of believing when everything screamed doubt. The cost of showing up when there was no guarantee of anything changing. That's why it's personal. That's why it hits different, because no one else carried that weight. No one else walked that path. And now there's no stopping. Not because of revenge, not because of pride, but because destiny doesn't wait. Purpose doesn't wait, and the soul knows when it's time. The comeback has already started. It started the moment the decision was made to rise again, to believe again, to fight again, and with every breath forward it becomes more unstoppable, not because of power, but because of clarity, because of pain turned into power, because of doubt turned into drive. It's personal because it had to be. Nothing else could carry it, nothing else could fuel it. When it's personal, it's not a maybe, it's not a someday, it's now, it's real. It's fire that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. It's a voice that may tremble but still speaks. It's a walk that may be slow but never stops. Keep going, keep rising, keep building. The world might not clap. But greatness doesn't ask for noise. It grows in silence. It thrives in purpose. And it never forgets why it began. The comeback is personal. The comeback isn't for applause, it's for reclaiming purpose. It's not about standing in front of a crowd waiting for claps, cheers, or recognition. It's about standing in front of a mirror and knowing deep down that the story isn't over. There's something inside that still wants more. Not more approval, not more attention, but more alignment with truth, with passion, with the reason for waking up in the first place. That reason that used to burn brightly but got buried under setbacks, distractions, or fear. When the dust settles and the noise fades, what's left is a quiet whisper that refuses to be silenced. That whisper says there's still a fight worth taking on, a mountain worth climbing, a message worth living. This isn't about ego. It's not about showing the world what's possible. It's about reminding the soul what it was made for. It's about reconnecting with the fire that once burned so strong it kept sleep away and made challenges feel like invitations. Over time, that fire can dim, life happens, people disappoint, doors close, but the truth remains, tucked away under the rubble of doubt and delay. And when that truth is rediscovered, it changes everything. The comeback is not some flashy entrance. It's a quiet, powerful return to authenticity. It's walking back into life with purpose in every step and intention in every word. There are moments where everything feels still. No audience, no validation, just breathe and heartbeat. And in those moments, the question is asked, why keep going? The answer doesn't come from applause. It comes from conviction, from an inner knowing that the journey is far from over, that there is still more to give, more to build, more to become. It's not about catching up to anyone or anything. It's about catching up to what was always inside, that dream, that vision, that unshakable belief that this life is not meant to be lived halfway. Strength was never gone, it just got quiet. It waited, it observed, it healed, and now it's rising. Not with noise, but with clarity, with the understanding that true power doesn't beg for attention. It commands it through action, through persistence, through showing up over and over, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching, because that's when it becomes real. That's when the comeback transforms from a moment into a mission. A quiet revolution that starts inside and refuses to be denied. The applause fades, the crowd moves on, but purpose stays. It evolves, it deepens, and when it's reclaimed, it becomes the engine that drives every thought, every step, every breakthrough. It turns pain into fuel, doubt into focus, and silence into strategy. It shifts the mindset from asking why me to declaring watch me, not for anyone else, but because the soul knows what it's here to do. And that knowing, that's the foundation of a comeback that no failure can stop and no setback can silence. Pain is the greatest teacher and fuel for growth. Nothing else cuts as deep, reshapes as thoroughly, or reveals as clearly. It doesn't ask for permission. It arrives unannounced, sits down without invitation, and begins its lesson whether one is ready or not. It strips away comfort, predictability, and illusion, and in the process it forces growth in places that were never meant to remain soft. Struggle does something that success cannot. It builds layers of strength beneath the surface. It pushes limits that were once thought to be final. It stretches the soul until breaking becomes bending and fear becomes fuel. Rejection has a way of sharpening the edges. It makes what once felt like failure turn into focus. It stops the constant chase for approval and begins a deeper journey into purpose. When doors close and voices walk away, what's left is something solid, something unshakable. The silence becomes space, space to reflect, space to regroup, space to grow. No noise, no distractions, just truth, and truth is never fragile. It's forged in the fire of adversity, tested in the storms of life, and proven in the choices made when no one's watching. Transformation never comes gift-wrapped. It comes disguised as hardship. It arrives with disappointment, heartbreak, and confusion. But behind every hard moment is an invitation, an opportunity to rise, to evolve, to become someone who no longer reacts out of fear but responds with power. Pain leaves a mark, but it also leaves wisdom, and wisdom becomes the guide. It says, you've been here before, you've survived worse, you're stronger than this moment. That's the voice that pain teaches. Not the one that breaks, the one that builds. What schools don't teach, life does, and life teaches through resistance. It throws challenge after challenge, not to destroy, but to awaken. Every challenge is a mirror, showing who a person really is and who they are capable of becoming. It reveals what matters, it removes what doesn't, and through it all, it plants the seeds of resilience. Seeds that grow roots in suffering, but blossom in persistence. There's no shortcut, no cheat code. Just the long, often lonely road of becoming, and the road is paved with trial and truth. Growth hurts, but it's the kind of hurt that heals, the kind of hurt that strengthens, the kind of hurt that turns wounds into wisdom. Every setback is a setup. Every loss carries a lesson, and every moment of being brought to the edge is a chance to see how far one is willing to climb. Pain doesn't just teach how to survive, it teaches how to thrive. How to keep moving when everything says stop, how to keep believing when nothing makes sense, how to keep building when everything's been torn down. No one chooses pain, but those who embrace it, who learn from it, who walk through it instead of around it, discover something rare. They discover resilience that's unshakable, a spirit that's untouchable, and a drive that's unstoppable, because pain didn't just hurt, it shaped, it molded, it refined, and what came out on the other side wasn't weak. It was unbreakable. The fight begins from within, not from outside support. It's easy to move forward when surrounded by applause, when motivation flows freely from voices saying, "You've got this." But what happens when those voices go quiet? What happens when the room empties, when the calls stop, when the energy of others no longer carries the weight? That's when the real fight begins. Not on a stage, not on social media, not in front of an audience. It begins in the silence, where no one's watching and no one's cheering. That's where the decision is made, to quit or to keep going, to fold or to rise, to wait or to move. When people vanish and praise disappears, what remains is raw truth. No masks, no performance, just that quiet flicker of fire inside that says there's more. And that fire doesn't need fuel from the outside. It feeds on something deeper, conviction, belief, memory of the vision that was once so clear. When everything is stripped away, the only thing left is the core, and that core either collapses or becomes the foundation. The foundation to rebuild, to reimagine, to reclaim what was never lost, only buried. Support is beautiful, but it can't be the reason. Praise is powerful, but it can't be the foundation. Opportunity is precious, but it can't be the source of strength, because all of those can vanish in a moment. And when they do, what's left will decide the outcome. Not talent, not connections, but grit, hunger, that inner voice that doesn't shout but whispers with unshakable certainty, keep going. Some people wait for someone to save them. Others realize no one's coming, and in that realization they find freedom, they find power, because if no one's coming, then there's no one to wait for, no one to impress, no one to lean on. There's just the next step. And taking that step with trembling legs is more powerful than waiting with perfect plans, because momentum builds from movement, not from comfort. That's the difference. The ones who make it aren't the ones who had the most help. They're the ones who made the choice when it was hardest, who dug deep when everything felt hollow, who reached inward instead of outward, because the true spark, the real one, is already there. It's been there all along. It just gets buried under expectation, doubt, distraction. But when the noise dies down and everything falls apart, that spark reveals itself. And if it's fed, if it's protected, it becomes a blaze. That blaze doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't need confirmation. It just burns, and that burn turns into action. That action turns into momentum, and that momentum turns into transformation. Not because someone gave permission, but because the soul said yes. When no one claps, when no one shows up, when the world moves on, that's when the real story begins. That's when the inner voice becomes the loudest. That's when purpose becomes louder than pain. And that's when the fight, the real fight, begins. Not from the outside, but from within. The journey is quiet, but the impact is undeniable. It doesn't begin with fanfare or bright lights. It begins in stillness, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when no one even knows there's a battle going on. That's where the real comeback begins to form, not in front of a crowd, but behind closed doors, in the silence where doubt and determination collide. It's in the early mornings when the world is still asleep and choices are being made. It's in the late nights when exhaustion sets in, but something inside says, keep going. That's where strength is built. That's where purpose is sharpened. A true comeback doesn't need noise. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout to be noticed. It simply continues day after day, step by step, in silence, in solitude, because the one walking that path isn't walking for praise. The one walking that path is walking with vision. With a fire so personal, so focused, that outside recognition becomes irrelevant. The reward is never the attention. The reward is becoming what was always possible, just hidden beneath fear, excuses, and waiting for the perfect moment. It's easy to admire success. It's harder to understand the process, because success doesn't post every failure. It doesn't broadcast every doubt. It doesn't announce every moment where quitting felt easier. What it does show, eventually, is transformation. It shows consistency. It shows results that speak louder than any words ever could. That's why the impact is so undeniable, because it wasn't built in a flash. It was carved slowly, relentlessly, by someone who refused to give up when it would have been easier to stop. There's something powerful about moving in silence. It teaches discipline. It creates focus. It removes the need to explain, to justify, to convince. It becomes about the work, about the process, about the internal commitment that says, no matter how long it takes, this is happening. That mindset, that quiet determination, is what separates those who start from those who finish. Because starting is easy, finishing requires something deeper, something quieter, something unshakable. The outside world may not see the effort, may not notice the growth, but that doesn't make it any less real. It doesn't make it any less powerful, because every small win, every quiet breakthrough adds up, it compounds, until one day the results speak so loudly they can't be ignored, not because they were shouted, but because they were earned. And when they arrive, they bring with them not just change, but a sense of fulfillment that can't be bought or faked. That's what makes the journey sacred, the fact that it wasn't built on hype, it wasn't fueled by validation. It was built in private, with grit, with sacrifice, with resilience. It was built by someone who chose to keep going when no one clapped, who kept building when no one believed, and who now stands as proof that the quiet path can still shake the world. Not through noise, but through undeniable results. It's personal because it had to be. No one else felt that weight. No one else stood in those shoes when everything seemed to collapse. No one else heard the silence that followed every loss, or carried the questions that kept echoing when the world moved on. It's personal because the journey wasn't shared, the pain wasn't witnessed. The fight wasn't visible. What others saw was the surface. What they never saw was the war beneath it, the countless times walking alone, trying to hold everything together while pretending everything was fine. That's why it hits different. That's why the fire burns deeper, because it was never about attention. It was about survival. It was about holding on when letting go felt easier, and that makes the comeback non-negotiable. When something becomes personal, it stops being optional. It stops being about motivation or inspiration or timing. It becomes a necessity, a force, a decision that won't be shaken, no matter how strong the storm. Because there's something sacred about what's earned in the dark. Something that can't be handed over, copied, or replaced. It's forged through endurance, through lonely nights, through rejection, through heartbreak. It's born from those moments where nothing made sense, yet the steps forward were still taken. When it's personal, it no longer matters who understands. It only matters that it's finished. This kind of comeback doesn't wait for support. It doesn't pause for applause. It doesn't seek permission. It just keeps moving, quietly, powerfully, steadily, because it's driven by something bigger than fear, bigger than pride, bigger than failure. It's driven by clarity, the kind of clarity that comes when the dust settles and the pain clears out every distraction. Suddenly, what matters becomes crystal clear, and that clarity becomes the compass. Not every step is certain, not every plan is perfect, but the direction is known, the destination is set, and the soul refuses to turn around. Pain is not just a teacher, it's a sculptor. It shapes, it refines. It pulls out what's unnecessary and strengthens what must remain. Pain doesn't just hurt, it transforms. It takes the raw, unfiltered experience of living through struggle and turns it into power. Not the loud kind, not the kind that intimidates. The quiet, deep, unwavering kind that speaks without saying a word. That's why this comeback can't be stopped, because it's not chasing anything, it's reclaiming, it's restoring, it's fulfilling something that was always meant to be. Purpose becomes louder than doubt, louder than fear, louder than every voice that said stop. When it's personal, the mission isn't to impress, it's to express, it's to become, to rise from everything that tried to hold back growth and walk forward with scars turned to strength. That's where the true power comes from the realization that nothing outside can define what was built inside. And once that realization is embraced, the world has no choice but to witness what was always there, unstoppable, unshaken, and undeniable.